Good evening and happy Halloween. This year I had two different ideas for Halloween specials, and I couldn't decide on one or the other, so I'm going to do both. So, this is the first Halloween special. I will be reading an excerpt from my debut novel, The Woods, a horror novel by Hazel E. Baumgartner. It is out now. It's currently on sale on Amazon. I believe that sale ends on Monday, so get it while it's hot there. This is the hardcover edition, which is uh, pretty nice overall. And then this back here is the paperback for comparison, which is also pretty nice. So grab yourself a copy if you like what you hear here. I'm the author, Hazel E. Baumgartner. Let's go. The Woods, a horror novel by Hazel E. Baumgartner. Chapter 1. I dreamed about her again. Dr. Meyer looked up from her notepad at her patient. Thomas Carlini was a middling man in the most literal sense of the word. He was 38 years old, the grandchild of immigrants from someplace in Europe, and was of average height and stature, sporting a square jaw, short black hair, and dull gray eyes. She probably passed a million men who looked like him on the street in her lifetime. If he wasn't her patient, she wouldn't have given him a second thought. Bless you. That was the cat. Harmony? She asked. Tom nodded, his eyes slowly tracing the cheap aluminum railing which segregated a grid of ancient yellowed ceiling tiles above him as he laid back in his seat. The same dream I've had a million times before. I'm there again, in Alaska. I'm walking through the woods on a foggy winter day. It's dark. There's snow out. It's absolutely frigid. I round a corner, and there she is, just standing there in the trail with tears streaming down her face. Then I wake up, just like always. Dr. Meyer noted the dream in her legal pads, though admittedly Tom had indeed told her about this dream 100 times before in the 4 years they'd been seeing each other. You know you're still grieving, right, Tom? It's natural. It's been 30 years, Doc. It's an injury, one you'll have to carry for the rest of your life. Rest, therapy, and conditioning all help, but you're always going to have that limp. You just gotta learn how to live with it. I know, Tom sighed. His eyes retraced the ceiling tiles. 36. There were 36 ceiling tiles in the room. He had counted them hundreds of times before. Dr. Meyer chewed the tip of her pencil and thought for a minute. What about your brother? She asked. When's the last time you spoke to him? Tom sat up. Jason? I don't know, maybe a month. We chat online sometimes, I guess. And you haven't seen him since? Last Christmas, or 2 Christmases ago, when we went down to Texas. How is he? He's well, I guess. He and Elise, they're doing okay for themselves. Do you ever talk to him about what happens? Tom shook his head. He doesn't like bringing it up, not after what all happened last time with Elise and them. Okay, she sighed. We're about out of time, so listen, I'm going to give you some homework. Talk to Jason. Make sure he's really doing okay. Can you do that for me? Tom sat up and nodded. Sure, Doc. I can do that. By the time Nathan Carlini pulled into the driveway of the little cabin in the woods outside of Juneau, Alaska, it had been nearly 6 hours since the tip had been called in. Nathan looked nearly identical to how his son would look 20 years later, except he wore his hair much more tidily trimmed, a comb-over gelled into place to hide his receding hairline, and sported a sharp salt and pepper mustache, cropped tightly along his upper lip. He pulled his rusty old blue pickup truck, definitely not the standard issue vehicle for the service, but Nathan always preferred to use his own vehicle whenever possible, behind the 2 sheriff's trucks and a black Cadillac which he assumed belonged to the federal agent who had been called in. Before he could shut the door to his truck, he was greeted by the locals. Good time from Anchorage? The sheriff asked, doing her best to make small talk. She was a stocky woman of 6 foot something, frizzy blonde hair graying around the edges and framing a face that was frozen into a perpetual scowl. The summer of 2002 had been a hot one, especially by Alaskan standards, and like every summer, her skin had bronzed into rawhide, much like most of the white folk in the northernmost state who spent any time whatsoever outside of the midnight sun. All right, time, Nathan answered. Most of the roads are intact this late into the season. Would have chartered a flight, but that's hard to do this time of year. She reached out her hand for a shake. We're lucky to have you. Agent Maytag said you're the best in the business for this sort of thing. Well, I don't know about that, Nathan said, but I know the best. Sheriff, I want to introduce you to my own sheriff. The other door on the powder blue pickup truck popped open, and another man hopped out. Jesus Christ and good Mother Mary, the man said as he stretched himself to his full height, roughly 6'1" if you included his boots and the crumpled brown ranchero hat he wore mashed atop his head. Sheriff, I want you to meet Sheriff Andrew Callahan of the Matsu Bureau. Guarantee you he's the guy for the job, or your money back. You know, Callahan said as he ran to the hood of the pickup truck and stole the sheriff's handshake from Nathan, I've tracked more bears than most folks have seen wild animals at all. If you need a bear found, I'm your man. Glad to hear it, the local brass responded. Agent Maytag and my deputy are up at the house. Place serves as a summer home, and we can get away from the wife of a local guy, Walter London. He came up here for a fishing trip this week and expecting to get out of trouble for a while, but found the place trashed. Suspected a break-in at first, but it's got all the telltale signs of a bear attack. Forced entry, fridge turned inside out, and anything remotely edible is missing. And you really think it's your problem, Bear? Callahan asked as he gestured towards the house. The trio started their way up the drive. The sheriff nodded. I'd hang my hat on it, yes, sir. Maytag talked to the neighbors already. They said they'd seen it in the neighborhood the night before. Said it came up above their cars, on all fours. Big son of a bitch. Here we are. They rounded a final line of scraggly fir hedging and came face to face with the front of the home. The metal security door over the front door had been bent neatly inwards, and a man in a green parka, who Nathan recognized as Agent Maytag, U.S. Parks and Wildlife, was collecting hair samples from the foam. He smiled when he saw Nathan, but barely took his eyes up from his work. Jesus Christ, Nathan muttered under his breath. The sheriff wasn't kidding. Beyond the forced-in front door, the house was in a state of disarray. The front door opened into an open great room, which now hosted an overturned couch, a scattered dining set, and a kitchenette with not a cabinet left unopened. The refrigerator had been ripped cleanly from the wall and knocked onto its side, where it had been opened and ransacked. Food trash and liquid freon littered the kitchen floor. This was a classic bear move. To a bear, the sickly sweet smell of the freon in a refrigerator smells an awful lot like the formic acid in an ant's nest, and ants are an excellent, low-risk source of protein, and an easy snack. Anyone hurt? Callahan asked the question Nathan was also wondering. Not that was reported, the local sheriff replied, but we're still pretty sure it was the same bear that mauled that camper out near Glacier Bay, which means he's headed for the border. The Canadians have asked us to wrap the job up before he crosses into the BC. Don't want an international incident, Callahan chuckled. If you asked me, Nathan mused, it's more likely the Mounties don't have the balls to shoot a so-called helpless bear, even if it is a killer. He turned to Callahan. Go get Dingo, he said, before the suit here mops up all the scent. I heard that, retorted Agent Maytag. The little incandescent light over the stove buzzed softly, the only noise in the otherwise silent house. Tom had long since finished eating and tucked himself into a recliner under the light of a floor lamp in the living room. His dinner tray discarded to the side, he now held a book in his hand, but he was too deep in thought to actually read it. His eyes had wandered over the same page 3 times by now, but he hadn't actually absorbed any of the words, just looked at them. Make sure he's really okay, Dr. Meyer's words bounced around in his head. Talk to Jason. Tom sighed and set down his book and produced a cell phone from his pocket. 2:24 a.m., the display flashed. Shit, it's late, Tom thought. Guess I'll call Jay tomorrow. Tom stood and crossed the living room of his little Kansas City 4-square house, passing the windows with the curtains pulled tightly shut, as they always were after dark, and double-checked that the front door was locked. He made his way around the perimeter of the house, double-checking that each window was secured, but doing his best not to look out of them. He always got the creeps looking out windows after dark. He double-checked the deadbolt on the back door, then flipped off the last of the lights and headed upstairs to bed. Tom? His wife, Isabel, asked in a sleepy voice as he entered the room. For God's sake, Tom, what time is it? About 11:30, Tom lied. Why are you just now coming to bed? I'm sorry, love. I was reading and lost track of time. He lay down in bed without giving his wife a second to question him, and said, I love you. Good night. I love you too, Isabel muttered as she drifted off back to sleep. Tom had, of course, always been enamored with storytelling and books in general. As a child, he and his siblings made their mother read her little paperback copies of the Chronicles of Narnia until the ink smudged off the page, the spines cracked, and the paper itself wore thin in the corners where Alice rubbed her thumbs on them to separate the pages. He had been born in Olympia, as had his older brother Jason. Alice had met their father, Nathaniel, there, while she was working an unpaid internship in a low-level office for the Washington state government, and it took until about after 2 children for them to get out of the state. Nathaniel had worked during that time, cutting lumber to size in a department hardware store to pay his way through college, and both yearned to escape to someplace with a lower cost of living someday. That break came in 1982. Nathaniel graduated with a degree in conservation and accepted a position with the United States Department of Forestry working in natural resource management. It was his dream job, working outside all day and traveling the country, living and breathing in the outdoors. He was eventually assigned to work in the Alaskan mountains and found the family a little parcel of land outside the village of Skatua. The funny thing about Skatua, of course, is its name. It seems like it's meant to sound vaguely indigenous, and that's because it is. Skatua was founded on the southern side of the Alaska Range during the Klondike Gold Rush in 1898. Located roughly an hour and a half north of Anchorage, the village consisted of a clump of some 200 wooden buildings inhabited almost uniquely by white settlers. These settlers saw the neighboring towns all had names like Nanenya, Koyukuk, and Chakotna, and decided that they needed an indigenous-sounding name too. The problem was that rather than asking an indigenous person what a good name might be, somebody just made up the name Skatua, and it stuck. This was largely indicative of what the next 100 years would be like in Alaska. The Carlini family parcel outside of Skatua covered around 100 acres, ranging from streams heading towards the mighty Susitna River to open prairies to rolling hills, terminating in the forested crag where the woods took off and ran out into miles upon miles of no man's land, owned by either the federal government, the state of Alaska, or out-of-state logging companies that came in once a year and picked the forest clean of any wood ripe enough to harvest. The parcel was so remote, in fact, that the next-door neighbors lived 2 miles away in Skatua, which had a permanent population of only 55. It was in this veritable paradise that Nathan Carlini used the expertise he had developed working in construction and hardware to pay his way through college, that he constructed a little 3-bedroom cabin for the family, surrounded by a fenced-off yard, a chicken coop, detached garage and work shed, and a crushed rock driveway spanning out towards a double-track road that ran along the river south towards civilization. It was the Carlini family's own little slice of paradise. Chapter 2. I'm going to read part of Chapter 2. "I need this cut to size," the old lady said. Nathan didn't hear her through her earplugs. He just saw her mouth move. Quickly, he set down his drink, removed one earplug, and asked, "Pardon?" "This wood," she responded, holding up a pre-cut length of dowel rod about 2 feet long. "I need it cut to size." Nathan shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "The saw isn't really safe to use on anything less than 4 feet long." "But this is too long," she groaned as her face contorted into a sour frown. "I need it cut to 18 inches. Nathan shook his head. "It's too short, ma'am. I can only make cuts on lengths longer than 4 feet. She held the dowel rod in front of her and closed one eye as if she were trying to comprehend its existence. "This is about 4 feet, she responded. "No, ma'am," Nathan said. "That's about 2 feet. It's too short." "Don't you get short with me," the woman snapped back. "I'm a paying customer." "Technically not," Nathan said back under his breath. "Excuse me?" "I said, technically," he repeated out loud enough for her to hear. "You're only a customer when you buy something. Right now you're just an angry old woman with a stick." The woman's face turned red and her nostrils flared with anger. "That's it!" she exclaimed. "I want to speak with your supervisor, young man." Nathan shrugged. "Knock yourself out." "Hey, Rick," he called to the store manager. "This lady needs help. I'm taking 5. From across the store, Rick nodded and headed over. Nathan smiled at the angry red lady and ducked away. He produced a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, a habit which he had told Alice he planned to quit, yet had by and large only managed to quit around her and his sons, and ducked out the store's back door. It was a perfectly dreary March day outside, chilly, but not so much that it could be called unseasonable for the Pacific Northwest. There was no sun, and despite the fact that it wasn't later than 1 in the afternoon, the thick clouds overhead had cast a dreary, pallid sort of dusk over everything. Nathan struck his cigarette pack against his hand a few times to pack the tobacco, then drew a smoke from the box and raised it to his lips. His hand slipped down into his jacket pocket to fish out his lighter as his eyes wandered across the deserted alleyway behind the hardware store, settling on the dumpsters where a white plastic bag was fluttering in the wind. Behind the dumpster, Nathan noticed motion. His hand stopped moving, curled around the lighter in his pocket, and he watched keenly as a yellow-colored tail wagged out from behind the dumpster. Nathan pulled his cigarette from his mouth and let out a gentle whistle. "Come here," he called. The tail retreated back behind the dumpsters, and in its place emerged the filthy head of a young puppy. Its eyes were narrow and beady, and glanced nervously in Nathan's direction. Its ears were erect and pointed, though one was missing a significant portion. The dog had the overall appearance of a feral wild animal, sizing up Nathan to decide whether or not he could provide its next meal. Nathan dropped into a squat instinctively, trying to make himself look small and less threatening. "Come here, dog," he coaxed. "I won't hurt you." The dog cocked its head in thought for a minute, then seemed to make up its mind that Nathan didn't pose a hazard. Slowly, it lowered its head and emerged from behind the dumpster. tail tucked between its legs and belly practically dragging on the ground, mimicking Nathan's non-threatening posture. "Look at you," Nathan whispered soothingly. "You're filthy, and you look like you haven't eaten anything besides trash in weeks. But there's a handsome boy somewhere under there." The dog approached him and sniffed his hand cautiously. "What a good boy," he praised the animal. "Yeah, let me get some food in you, and you'll shape up right into a fine dog. A good dog." It didn't take Dingo long at all to pick up the bear's scent. He was in no way bred as a scent dog, but he definitely had a good nose about him. As soon as he figured out what smells were bear, he was pointing, and Nathan and Andrew Callahan hardly had time to grab their tracking gear and their rifles before he was leading them off into the brush. Hopefully the bear hasn't gone far, Nathan thought, but he was apprehensive to say the least about running into the big ugly fucker once he found it. As far as Nathan knew, the London property extended for some miles back past the cabin, so he wasn't too worried about trespassing. Plus, even if he did inadvertently wander onto someone else's parcel, he had a badge and a gun, and as far as he was concerned, he was on official business. A problem bear wasn't going to hunt itself. "Doesn't it make you a little sad?" he mused to Callahan. "A bear is a beautiful creature, and here we are out for blood." "Beautiful creature, my ass," Callahan replied. "A bear may be a beautiful creature, but a problem bear is, well, another bear altogether. Do you know, Nathan, where the word bear comes from, etymologically speaking?" Nathan shrugged. "Do I look like a fucking etymologist?" "Bear comes from the Proto-Germanic language, the ancestor to basically all Western European languages, including English," explained Callahan. "It comes from the word Bjorn, which means brown one. The original word for bear in Proto-Germanic has been lost to time, but probably more closely related to the Latin word ursus. The pagans of prehistoric Europe treated all bears as monsters, akin to dragons or trolls. They saw their raw strength and attributed magical powers to them. The theory is that, by calling the animal by its proper name Ursus, you would summon one, so they used the euphemism the brown one instead, and it stuck around longer than the animal's original name." "They're not all monsters, though," said Nathan, suddenly very concerned with defending the unproblematic bears. "That's what makes the bad ones problem bears, and not just bears." No, of course not. And now we use the Latin and Greek names for them, scientifically speaking. Now that we treat them like animals, not monsters, we call them Ursus arctos in scientific literature, literally bear. It's their old names demystified once again. But out here, in the woods, Callahan gestured behind them, and Nathan realized that they had now followed Dingo far enough into the woods that they could no longer see the cabin, the relative safety of their truck, or any immediate hope for backup behind them. Out here in the woods, a bear is a bear. To continue reading, you'll have to buy a copy because I am running out of recording time and I have another video to record. But that's the first 28 pages of The Woods, a horror novel. If you buy it right now, it is on sale on Amazon. $13 for the paperback instead of $15. The price will probably be going back up after this weekend because this book is officially 1 year old on Sunday? Officially 1 year old on Sunday. So, yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. I hope you pick up the rest of the book, and I hope you enjoy it. Happy Halloween, and I will see you on the next one.